Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Thrilled to have another beautiful day as we begin the month of Elul. Today is the third day of the month of Elul, which means we're winding down the year in epic fashion. That's how we do it as Jews. We don't wind down the year on a low note. We end it on a high note. Many people have the custom to actually blow the shofar every day of the month of Elul, besides for the last day, which currently we are doing. We do some extra prayers. We add chapter 27 of the book of Psalms called Lid David. We also add extra chapters of Tehillim at the end of our prayers every day as we prepare for Rosh Hashanah. It's a beautiful time to reflect on the year, to reflect on what needs improvement, and to ask for forgiveness on things that were done not in the best way. It's also a joyful time because, as the Alter Rebbe explains so beautifully in an example he gives in his mimer, he says that it's like a king that's in the field where before heading to the palace, he's walking around the fields and he's very approachable and he greets everyone with smiles, and everyone who wants could just come over from from their homes and go over to the king and talk to him. So similar to that, that's what Hashem is like during this month, and that's why it's actually not considered a holiday because God is very approachable. It's not like on a Yom Tov where things are more serious. Over here, we have God that's very approachable, and we're supposed to utilize this time in the best way possible. All right, we are in a great part of Shar Habitachon. We're actually starting chapter 5. Chapter 5 of Shar Habitachon, we're using the class edition, which is this one over here, and we're going to be on page 206. I just would like to give a little bit of a summary and a little bit of a heads up of what to expect. Um, in chapter 4, it was laying out many positive outcomes that flow from having Bitachon in Hashem. Earlier, we explained what is Bitachon. We explained it's a feeling of serenity and why only Hashem is the one deserving of our trust. Because Hashem has all the qualities that we look for in a person with Bitachon. And then we said that when you have Bitachon, we are calm. We're not anxious, not about livelihood. We're not anxious about health. We're not anxious about our future. We're working in the world, making a vessel, but we also know that the result of everything that happens is coming from Hashem, not from our frantic efforts. So therefore, it's inexcusable or it's unimaginable to push things that are not um, ethically correct and not halachically correct, because your bitachon is in Hashem, so it's going to come from Hashem, not from the value you put in another person or the extra hours you're going to put in on Shabbos, God forbid. When you live that way, you don't fear people because you know that they can't harm you and they can't help you without it being Hashem's will. You know it's coming from Hashem. So therefore, you don't feel compelled to flatter. You won't feel compelled to bribe. You won't compromise on values because your bitachon is in Hashem, which is such a beautiful mindset to have. So whatever comes your way, you're emotionally balanced. You're not, whatever comes your way, life's ups and downs, you'll accept it all with serenity, knowing that it's all coming from Hashem. And therefore, when a person is on an up and you're very successful and you see great things happening, you don't get overly arrogant. And when a loss happens, when something down happens in your life, it doesn't break you because it's all coming from Hashem. And since you know Hashem is providing for everything, you're not jealous from other people what they have. You don't feel a rivalry when other people, you see them having success and competition because it's all coming from Hashem. And Hashem knows exactly what is best for you. And therefore, it frees your mind to be able to focus on spiritual things instead of being consumed by worry. And we ended the chapter by saying that it gives you better character traits. That when you have bitachon, you're naturally humble because you know it's all coming from Hashem. So it avoids arrogance, like we just said. You're generous because you're not fearful to give. You're not going to hold on to your money, realizing that this is all a blessing from Hashem, and Hashem always has the best for you in store. And you see blessings in everything that comes your way. Now that we do that, chapter 5 really has a beautiful flow to it. where it's going to be really contrasting um, the beautiful result of having Bitachon, how it comes out in our daily life. We'll see the difference between a person who has Bitachon, who has a trust in Hashem, versus a person who puts his trust in other people, or puts his trust in power, or puts his trust in wealth, or puts his trust in his bank account, whatever it is. Um, you'll see the contrast between them. Any questions so far?
No.
Uh, yeah. Okay, cool. So in other words, we're trying to apply bitachon in our real life situations. Um, so we're going to apply it in our relationship with God, apply it with other people, and apply it in our world, seeing how bitachon affects us. I can't tell you the amount of people I speak with that is, in a state of panic. It's specifically older people that, don't have um, a spouse to speak things over with. And when I speak to them, they almost feel like the world is coming to an end. And you could look at the news and feel that it's true. But learning this book, you realize how far away that is, how false that is. So whatever comes in our world, you'll see a person, it's called a Baal Bitachon, a person who owns Bitachon, a person who's got this. Um, we'll see the practical difference in this chapter between someone who really trusts in Hashem and someone who doesn't trust in Hashem. So just to make it a little more relatable, most people act differently when you're in front of a boss, or you're in front of a donor, or you're in front of an influential figure. Because why do you act differently? Because they feel, we're not talking about ourselves, we're talking about most other people, they feel that their livelihood depends on that person or depends on them. But someone who has this bitachon that their parnasa, their livelihood, is coming from Hashem, they don't change who they are in front of another person. They could be honest, they could be calm, they could be kind, they are not filled with anxiety, no matter who's in front of them, because they have bitachon. They know it's coming from Hashem. So I think that's going to be a theme of the chapter as we're going to start it. Literally, the opening title is called "The Distinctions of a Man with Trust." So we'll see the differences of a person who has trust in Hashem versus a person who doesn't. And just to give a little bit of a heads up, the person who trusts in Hashem, they're going to be dignified, they're going to be generous, they're going to be calm, they're going to be free, they're going to be themselves. The person who trusts in other people will be um, anxious, or if they trust in possessions, that's even better to say. Um, they're going to be dependent on a thing, dependent on or enslaved, and they're going to be anxious with things that come up. Um, when you have bitachon, you ever meet people, and so many of us have this, where you need to be in control. Um, a person who has bitachon knows that they're not in control. So I guess I have to understand that part. We're going to get to there soon. So, instead of me talking anymore, let's read it inside. But the point is going to be that bitachon, it's not just a belief, it's a lifestyle. Bitachon transforms how we relate to other people. Bitachon transforms how we relate to wealth, how we relate to honor, how we relate to fear. Um, okay, so let's see it inside. Oh, good morning, Nancy. Okay, so let me share my screen now that we gave that summary and see if it makes sense if we see these ideas in the words. Uh, and I'll just put the link again in the chat box for anyone who wants to have the link to them for their own reading or even just alongside. Yeah. Okay, so we are starting. You could just see how long we spent on chapter 4, how many sections there were. So now we're going to be at the beginning of chapter 5. This is again from Rabbeinu Bachai or Baki, that was his name. And here we go. Hope everyone could see. In the previous chapters, in the book, it's on page 206, or you could just follow alongside. It's on the screen. The author explained that even a person who solely relies on God to provide for all his needs must also engage in a natural means of pursuing his livelihood and other needs. In this chapter, the author will discuss the contrast between people who have bitachon and those who don't in the manner in which they pursue their livelihoods. So we will now discuss the differences between those who rely on God and those who don't with regards to their involvement in the pursuit of means of their livelihood. I will say that the person who relies on God for his livelihood and other needs will differ in 7 ways from those who do not have a trust in Hashem. So again, there's going to be 7 differences that he's going to list out now between a person who has trust, and some of them are going to be very easy to know, and some of them we're going to elaborate a little more on. A person who has trust in Hashem will always be grateful. The first difference, the person who relies on God willingly accepts his judgment in all matters and thanks him for both the good and the bad. And we'll quote some sources, but let's just see what the Tanya and other Hasidic sources say on it. It's a little bit long. It's just at the bottom of the line if you're looking in the book. Yeah, it's a pretty long one. Thanks him for both the good and the bad. The Mishnah states a person is obligated to bless God for the bad in the same manner that he blesses him for the good. We find no differentiation between the bad that comes from God directly and the bad that comes through the medium of another person who has freedom of choice regarding his actions. In both scenarios, we are obligated to bless God. This can be understood by introducing the doctrine of continuous creation, whereby the creator is continuously animating all of creation. So this is taken from Bigeret HaKodesh, which is a part of the Tanya that we didn't learn together, but it's similar to the idea that we learned in Shar Yichud V'Emunah, which is the concept of um, um, this idea of continuous creation, that God is constantly creating. And the point that we're trying to bring out is if God is constantly creating, everything is coming from Hashem. Even what seems like bad is actually coming from Hashem, and there's no bad that comes from the heavens. Therefore, even when a person chooses to do evil and harm another, it was still done to the recipient by divine providence. The perpetrator will be held accountable by God separately. Therefore, we ultimately need to see everything that happens to us, even something that seems to have been perpetrated by a person, as having been orchestrated by God, and we must bless him for it. So again, according to this, there's no difference between bad that came directly from heaven, like a person who was struck by lightning, or bad that came through the medium of another person. Because even when it comes from another person, it actually came from Hashem. Now, the fact that it came from that other person, it's because that person chose to do it, then he will be punished. But even that, it came from Hashem. It was just a wild idea. Furthermore, everything God does is not only for the good, it is inherently good. We simply may not perceive it as good for the time being. This knowledge gives us a fascinating and deeper insight into the meaning of the Talmud's teaching of Kol Ma David Rahmana L'Tav Avid. So if anyone's familiar with that quote, some of you actually know the story quite well, but maybe the Aramaic you're not familiar with. The story, this quote was said by Rabbi Akiva. And the story is, and I'll say it a little bit quickly because most of you are familiar with it. It says about Rabbi Akiva that he was once outside of a city in Israel, that had a curfew, and they didn't allow him into the city. This was shortly after the temple's destruction. Everything was being owned by the Romans and ruled by the governors of Rome, and things were very dangerous. And he was told that it's past a certain hour, and they didn't allow him into the city gates. So he had to spend the night outside in the forest, which was obviously very, very dangerous. But he said, this is all, whatever God does is for the good. And he had with him a rooster, a candle, and a donkey. The rooster was to wake him up early to do his prayers. The candle was in order to be able to study at night. And the donkey was to be able to hold his belongings, his books and his belongings. Anyway, the story is that a wind came and extinguished the candle, and he said everything that God does is for the good. A cat came and ate the rooster, and he says everything that God does is for the good. And a fox, or I forgot what else, came and ate, obviously not a fox, but some other animal came and ate the donkey. And again, he said everything is for the good. And shortly after that, the Roman army came marching through the city, broke through the gates, and looted the entire city, took people captives, and it was a terrible danger. And only then did he realize how it all worked out for the best. Because if the candle would have been lit, they would have spotted him in the forest. If the rooster or the donkey would have been alive, they would have gave away his position when they would have panicked and made noise. So he was able to see it. So that's the simple story. But now the way the Rebbe is going to explain the story of Kol Ma David Rahmana Latav Avid, that everything God does is for the good, he's going to actually learn it a little bit deeper. The literal translation is everything that God does is for the good. We're back inside. And that's the story from Rebbe Akiva taken from the tractate Brachot of the Talmud. Meaning we see many things, good and bad, but we proclaim that everything that God does is for the good. The deeper understanding is that when we see everything, so again, we're taking the actual words of here, kol ma, which means everything that we see through the proper lens, it is God, who is beyond time, and past, present, and future are all the same to him, who is making it happen. David Rahmana. Then from that perspective, the future good is felt in the present. So I just want to explain this again. If you see everything that is coming from God, Ma means it's like a high level of God. Ma is like you can't even define what it is. Everything that's coming from Hashem, and you see it through the proper lens that it's Hashem that's beyond time, it's coming from Hashem and He's making it happen. Rahmana, it's coming from God. And then when you see it as it's coming from God, you could feel the future even in the present. Okay, so let me just explain this one more time. The fact is, in the basic story, Rabbi Akiva experienced darkness because the candle was extinguished. He just trusted that it's for the good. And he was sure that in the future he'll see how this came out good. And that's exactly what happened. He saw in the future how it came out for the good. But if your perspective is that it's all coming from Hashem, then when you have that lens on, even what's really only going to be exposed and revealed in the future, you could actually see now also. If you put on the lens of the proper lens that everything is coming from Hashem, that controls everything and that is in charge of everything, and that everything is part of Hashem, then even what Hashem will show you in the future, you're able to actually be privy to now. You know it's coming from Hashem. The future good is felt in the present. You could feel it in the present. So instead of feeling that the candle is extinguished, and I'm sure I'll see the reason behind it, you're able to even see the candle being extinguished as part of a blessing coming from Hashem. Meaning even hardships in your life, when you have this perspective of bitachon, you're able to see it as actually being a blessing. And we all have, parts of our life where we have highs and we have lows. And, when a person is given a 60-day notice on their house that they have to leave, it's a low. They, weren't expecting it. They have to leave. But if you're able to, no one could preach this to you. But if you're able to have this lens that this is all coming from Hashem, and therefore I'm not going to wait for the future to believe it, but I'm going to allow myself to see it in the present, you could see the blessings now as well. I think it's a very high level to be at. You have to be on the level of Rabbi Akiva, but I'm pretty sure Rabbi if the Rebbe is teaching it to us, it's because all of us are privy to this deeper perspective. So again, kol ma, everything that's coming from this deepest level of God, which means the level of ma, which is what is it? Meaning it's a level of God that is beyond time. Past, present, and future is all one. It's all coming from Hashem. And therefore, you could see even now the perspective, how it's even in the present, you could see the blessing. The source of this immutable love toward God, a love that is not dependent on anything, a love where a Jew blesses God regardless of what happens to him, is our inherent connection with God. Not only are we his children who naturally love their father and are naturally loved by their father, and a father only wants good for his children, but we are connected with him. Again, this is such a high level to be at, where when the love is so deep and our connection is so strong and we're connected with him, then you bless God for everything that comes your way, knowing that it is good. But God only wants the best for you, just like a father only wants the best for his children. Even after a soul descends into this world, it retains an essential bond with God, and that bond will never allow for anything bad to happen. When we access this level, we can bless the bad just as we bless the good, because bad is merely a perception that is not worth considering when we speak about an essential connection to God, which can only produce good. Okay, so it's a very deep level, but to be on a level where even when something bad happens to us, we see it as good and we're going to bless God. Why? Because our connection with God, even after it comes into this world, it remains very strong. So if we're connected with God, it could only produce good to us. Okay. The word bitachon, which literally would mean trust and guarantee and security, it's all connected to the same word, but the middle two letters in the Hebrew is the word tach. You see the T-A-C-H, tach. In Hebrew, the word tach means plaster. So tach, meaning plaster, it holds together everything that it covers. Something somewhat like a friendship, which brings people together. So a plaster is a connecting thing where it connects two bricks together or two things together. So bitachon is also a connector. So similar to friends, where friendship, right, it brings people together. Naturally, good friends trust each other. The greater the friendship, the greater the bond. The greater the bond, the greater the certainty that each will only do what is in the other's best interests. This then is the idea of trust. Our bond with God is so strong that we are almost plastered together. We have cemented our friendship, so to speak. Such a beautiful idea. So friendship, it really it boils down to bitachon. The closer you are, the more you trust that person, right? The greater the bond is. When you have a greater bond with the person, you're certain. The more certain you are that they have your best interest in mind. So a lot of times you don't understand what they're doing, but you trust that it's for your best because you're close to them. So the closer you are, the more trust you have in the friendship. So the word bitachon has in it the plaster. Tach is the middle root of the word bitachon, and it comes from the idea of that connecting between us and Hashem. When we are this connected to God, we have no doubt that He will do everything in His power, which is limitless, to ensure that everything He does is for our ultimate good. And this connection leads to certainty that the end result will surely be revealed good. Furthermore, not only are we merged and connected with God, but according to the Zohar, a Jew and God are one. Certainly, then, a loving God who is ultimate good will provide each and every Jew precisely what is good for him at each and every moment. And that's from the Zohar. So let's just get to the bottom line. Bad is merely a perception, and it is not worth considering. So just to summarize this beautiful commentary from different sources of Chassidus, um, yeah, we it definitely covered a lot. The point is that in here we said we'll thank God both for the bad, for the good, and for the bad. And before we quoted some sources, we just wanted to explain how could you have that perspective? Because when you see yourself as so connected to Hashem, everything that Hashem does is for our good. We're absolutely connected to Hashem. And for Hashem, He only brings us the good. Similar to in a friendship, when you're close to another person, you're certain that they only have your best interest in mind. So how much more so it is when it comes to Hashem. Okay, so now he's going to bring sources from all over um, that brings us out. As the verse states, the Lord gave, we say this actually at a funeral, Hashem natan v'Hashem lakach. The Lord gave and the Lord took. May the name of the Lord be blessed. And as it is written, I shall sing of kindness and judgment. So singing of kindness, that makes sense. When it's an attribute of judgment, but still sing to God, that's the idea of blessing God for the bad as much as you do for the good. And our rabbis of blessed memory said in explaining this verse in Brachot, they said, if it is kindness, then I will sing the praises of God. And if it is judgment, then I will also sing his praises. That's a very powerful line. They also said a person is obligated to bless God for the bad in the same manner that he blesses him for the good. The Talmud explains this Mishnah to mean that a person is obligated to accept with joy the bad that God agrees, just as he accepts the good. Conversely, so this is the idea of gratitude, that being grateful that a person feels, knowing that it's coming from Hashem, having bitachon that it's coming from Hashem, and therefore it's good. Conversely, a person who does not rely on God praises and glorifies himself for the good that befalls him, as it says, for the wicked man boasts about the desire of his soul, and the robber congratulates himself for having blasphemed the Lord. A person who doesn't trust in God boasts and credits himself for his own accomplishments when things go well. However, when things don't go well, he becomes angry at God. He's angry at God for the bad that befalls him, as it says in Isaiah, and it shall come to pass that when he is hungry and angry, he shall curse his king and his God and will look and look upward. So here's the difference between a person who trusts in Hashem versus a person who doesn't have that trust in Hashem. When things go good, he takes the credit. And when things go bad, right, what's the verse? He glorifies himself for the good. And when things go bad, he blames Hashem. So the first difference is person who has bitachon in Hashem is grateful and accepts everything from Hashem. A person who doesn't have this strong bitachon in Hashem blames Hashem for everything. Here's the second one: happy-go-lucky. The second difference: when a person relies on God, his soul and heart are at ease with respect to all of God's decrees, due to his knowledge that the Creator directs them for his good, both in this world and in the world to come. A person who knows that everything that God does is for the good can feel at peace, knowing that he is in good hands. The author now quotes a verse from Psalm as proof. King David of blessed memory said, "Only to God should you hope." This is a beautiful melody that's by Chabad Hasidim. They sing, it's known as a melody, which is only to God should you hope. Domi nafshi, my soul, for my hope is from him. Kimimenu tikvati. Tikva is the Hebrew word for hope. So from him is my hope. So only to God should you hope, my soul, for my hope is from him. So a person who trusts in Hashem, you're able to be at ease. You're able to know that it's all coming from Hashem, and Hashem is directing everything for your good. Conversely, a person who does not rely on God is in a state of constant grief and protracted anxiety. Mourning and sadness will not depart from him, both when things are going well for him and when they are not. Even when things go well for him, he is not happy or calm. When things go well for him, he is sad and anxious because of his lack of satisfaction from his current state of being, from his current state of being, and because of his aspirations to add, increase, and amass wealth. When things go badly for him, he is sad and anxious because he loathes that situation, which goes against his desires, nature, and character traits. As the wise man, King Solomon said, all the days of a poor man are bad, but he who has a cheerful heart always has a feast. In Hebrew, the words are tov lev, mishteh tamid. A cheerful heart always has a feast. The poor man in this verse refers to a person who lacks bitachon and is of poor intellect, because he doesn't realize that everything is from God and is for his good. So when King Solomon says a poor man, he's not talking about financially poor. He's talking about a person with poor intellect, which I wouldn't have understood that on my own. So a person of poor intellect, which means he's lacking bitachon, everything that comes his way, he's not happy with. When things that are good, he feels it's not enough. And he's anxious because he feels that he needs to add, or he feels maybe someone will take it away from him. When things are good for him, no, and sorry, when things are bad for him, he's upset, and he it's such a fascinating idea. So far we have 2 out of the 7. The first one is you could see a distinction between a person with bitachon versus a person without bitachon. That a person with bitachon, he's going to be grateful for whatever comes his way. He knows it's coming from Hashem. A person without bitachon is going to take the credit when things are good and blame God when things are bad. Second difference or contrast is a person with bitachon is always at ease. He knows it's coming from Hashem, and therefore he can be at peace because he's in good hands. And a person who does not have this bitachon, he's always anxious. He's anxious when things are going good because he feels it's not enough, and he's anxious when things are going bad, which is fascinating. Okay, now we're going to get to the third. The third difference, while a person who relies on God also involves himself in various means of obtaining his livelihood and other needs, he doesn't rely on them, nor does he expect them to either benefit him or cause him harm unless God willed it to be. The only reason he involves himself in them is his choice to carry out the service of the Creator, who instructed him to involve himself in the world, to settle it and correct it. If he benefits from the means that he is engaged in, or they protect him from harm, then he will thank God alone for it. He will not increase his love and affection for them, nor will his mind be more at rest because of them. Rather, he will strengthen his trust in God and rely on him alone and not at all on the means. If the means that he engaged in does not help him, then he will understand that his livelihood will reach him when God wills it to come, and in whichever manner he decides. Consequently, he will not reject engaging in them, nor will he cease involving himself in them, because his ultimate goal is the service of his Creator, which is a beautiful idea. So the attitude a person has when he relies on Hashem, that he knows that he has to have the means to obtain a livelihood, but he knows that ultimately it's coming from Hashem. So if he's successful, he doesn't put the credit in the work, he puts the credit in Hashem. When it's not successful, he knows that God wills it to be this way, and it will come from another direction. However, a person who does not rely on God involves himself in the means of pursuing his livelihood because he relies on them for help and protection from harm. If they do indeed help him, then he will praise them and his own efforts, and he will put into them. So again, a person who doesn't rely on Hashem, he's pursuing his livelihood, and he relies on them. So if it's good, he praises the source where it came from. In such an instance, he will choose to continue engaging in those means, and he will not turn to other means of pursuing his livelihood. If, however, they do not help him, then he will abandon them, reject them, and turn his desire away from them. As the verse states, which is from Habakkuk, therefore he sacrifices to his net, and he burns incense to his trawl. This verse speaks about the wicked person who, upon seeing that he is successful while serving idols and perceiving them as the reason for his success, offers sacrifices to them. This implies that when things don't go well for him, he abandons them. This is cited to show that the person who doesn't trust in God only engages in the means of pursuing a livelihood when it works out for him. And when it doesn't, he will reject them. According to Paslachim, this means that not only will the person cease engaging in those means himself, but he will cause others to reject them and to be dissuaded from engaging in them. Okay, so far we got through 3 of the 7 ideas. So just to summarize the first 3, and really the whole chapter 5 is rather small. Chapter 5 is all just summarizing these 7 contrasts between a person who trusts in Hashem and a person who doesn't. And so far what we have is number 1, a person who has bitachon accepts joyfully everything that comes his way, even the bad, because he knows that it's coming from Hashem. In contrast, a person who does not have trust in Hashem, he gets angry when there's bad that comes his way. Number 2, we said, a person who has bitachon is, the title was happy-go-lucky, which means he's with peace. He has peace of mind, knowing that it's all coming from Hashem, and therefore it's for his good. In contrast, a person who does not have bitachon is constantly anxious, is always worried, because he's never happy with his lot. If he's successful, he feels he doesn't have enough. If he's not successful, he's loathsome and upset. And the one we just learned, number 3, was a contrast that if a person has bitachon in Hashem, even if it's not lucrative, whatever means he puts himself into making a livelihood, he knows that it's coming from Hashem. Because if he's successful, he says it's coming from Hashem. If it's not successful, he knows that it's the will of Hashem that it should be this way, and Hashem will take care of him at the right time. Now, a person who doesn't have bitachon in Hashem, he'll only engage in means that bring him success and wealth. And if it doesn't, he'll drop it and reject it. And he will cause others to reject it as well, as we just said. Okay. We're up to the 4th difference, which is budget properly. If you're looking in the book, it's going to be on page 211. The 4th difference, when the person who relies on God has more money than he needs for his livelihood, he spends it on matters that please the Creator. May he be blessed, such as charity and the like. Furthermore, he does so generously and from the goodness of his heart, as it says, for all is from you, ki mimcha hakol, and from your hand we have given it to you. Meaning it's from Hashem. Your hand over here is talking about Hashem's hand. In this verse, King David is describing how he and other officers of Israel donated large sums for the building of the Holy Temple, and that they did so because they realized that everything is from Hashem. Person who has bitachon and realizes that everything is from Hashem will generously give his money for charity and other mitzvot. And I marvel at people that have this concept that it's all Hashem's money. People, sometimes when they give donations, they're like, Rabbi, don't even thank me. It's not my money, it's Hashem's money. And I think that itself is deserving of thanks when they have the mindset. I think it's coming from, as he's saying here, it's coming from bitachon. They may not know that it's coming from bitachon, but when a person gives generously and they're not fearful to give, and they're like, oh my gosh, how am I going to, what if something happens to me? How am I going to take care of myself? They're giving tzedakah right now. And they know that it's really Hashem's money, and this is what Hashem wants. So when he has more than what he needs, he's able to give it away or spend it in a generous way to help others, knowing that it's coming from Hashem. Such a beautiful idea. Conversely, a person who does not rely on God does not view the entire world and all that is in it as enough for his livelihood and to satisfy his needs. He is concerned about his money and therefore does not use it to fulfill his obligations towards the Creator and toward other people. He does not realize that he is losing his money until he loses all of it and is left without it. That's a heavy ending. The person who has bitachon spends his extra money on mitzvot, while the person without bitachon is miserly because he feels that he never has enough. We might think that the person who is miserly would have more money, yet we often see that he ends up losing it all. So I just want to, just give some examples. Like, thank God I've been a Chabad rabbi here in Novato for 13 years. We moved here in 2012. And it's just so interesting to see different styles of people. And I'm totally, totally not blaming them for having different mindsets. I'm sure it comes from nurture, it comes from nature. But I remember this one person who, oh, I'm sorry, Chava, I'm just seeing that now. I remember this one person who, before the 2016 elections, I remember it was the high holidays. The high holidays was right before the elections. And he says, Rabbi, I can't give money now because it depends on the elections. And he was sure that the economy would tank if Trump got elected. And therefore he says, if, he's guaranteeing that if Clinton wins, and that was 2016, right? He's able to give generously. And he was wrong. And he didn't want to give generously because he was scared of what the outcomes were going to be, and which is understandable. Anyway, we all know that the market really picked up after that election, and more recently, it was just like always one thing after the other. And just putting it in the context of this section in chapter 5, it's a person who doesn't have bitachon will always be miserly because whenever they have, if they're not relying on Hashem, everything that comes their way is still not enough. Meaning they're always going to be worried about um, after their retirement or about the worries of medical needs or worries about what if something happens. I'm not saying it's wrong because I mean, I have that worry also. But when you have bitachon, you know that it's coming from Hashem. When you don't have bitachon, you're always going to be concerned. And the way he ends off over here, it's a pretty heavy ending that he's going to end up losing his money because I just want to, let me just pull up the words over here. I want to make sure I'm understanding it. Uh, he does not realize that he is losing his money until he loses all of it and is left without it. We might think that a person who is miserly would have more money, yet we often see that he ends up losing it all. And he cites a verse as a source for this concept. This is referring to commandments that are between man and God and between man and his fellow. Bottom line is be strong in your trust, and you will find a job that allows you to carry out all your obligations. Okay, so he brings verses. As the wise man King Solomon said, there is one who gives freely and yet increases his money, and one who withholds from giving what is proper only to end with a loss. The Hebrew is powerful. Yesh, this is from Mishlei, King Solomon's book of Proverbs. Yesh mefazer v'nosef od, v'chosech miyosher ach lemachzer. Chosech, he withholds from giving what is proper. Yosher is like what's straight, only to end up with a loss. The person who spends money on mitzvot is given more, while the one who withholds his money ends up losing. We have people in our community. I remember as we get closer to the high holidays, an etrog is a big deal around Sukkot. And if some people may have watched a film called Ushpizin, I think it was called, where there was all about an etrog that a religious person purchased, and secular people came and ended up cutting it up as a lemon or something, and he was going crazy. Anyway, I don't remember all the details of the film, but like I know my brother, he has this perspective that when you spend money on a mitzvah, it's never going to hurt you. So you could spend and you'll see blessing come as a result. Like around the high holidays, people purchase a beautiful etrog. And the fact is, when you buy a nice etrog, you have less money in your account. But having a perspective of bitachon is on the contrary. No, I'm going to spend money on a mitzvah and I'm going to see even more come my way. I mean, that's the whole, God's one time that he dares people is about tzedakah, where when you take care of other people, Hashem promises to take care of you even more. And you have to have a bitachon mindset to make sense out of it, because otherwise it makes no sense. Logically, if I give, I have less. But over here, King Solomon is saying there are those who spend and make more. What's the who give freely and yet increase? So actually around the dinner table last night, my daughter Kaya, she's 9 years old, and she wanted to know why on high holidays we don't auction off different honors. So in many more traditional communities, I don't know if anyone here is familiar with it, um, they would auction off, let's say, the honor of getting an aliyah on Yom Kippur. The maftir aliyah of Mincha is called maftir Yonah, where the Haftorah, we read it from the book of Jonah, is considered a big honor. And in the Kabbalistic books, it says that it's a blessing for wealth for the year, for the person who gets that aliyah. There's another, which is the honor of opening the ark by Ne'ilah, which is the end of Yom Kippur. It's a big honor to open the ark, and it's considered to bring blessings for health and healing for the year. So in more traditional communities, or like more orthodox communities, I would say, it's auctioned off, meaning how much would a person give for the honor of getting this aliyah or this opening of the ark. And sometimes people don't even do it for themselves. They'll actually purchase the honor and then give it to someone else. Like in 770, by the Rebbe, that's how it was, right? People would want the honor to be able to give it to the Rebbe, to win that honor to give to the Rebbe. So my daughter Chaya was asking why we don't do it here in our community. We don't auction off. Um, and it was I mean, my answer was because people in our community don't really appreciate the understanding of paying for a mitzvah, right? It's an honor to get it, but it's hard for a person to understand why are you selling a mitzvah? Why are you making it into an auction? And so we don't, by Israelis, even in our community, they ask us to do it. And, I'll do it quietly, meaning if a few Israelis want to decide between themselves, they maybe appreciate it. I don't have a problem with it, but I could see why for a person who it's their one time a year that they're coming and they see us selling the rights to an aliyah, it could not sit right. But over here, the idea where you're spending money on a good thing, it's only going to come as a blessing to you. And I think it's a beautiful thing where like many of us spend money on things that we want, whether it's a massage or whether it's a nice car. But when it comes to a mitzvah, it's like, whoa, it's $90 for a mezuzah. Why is it so much? And I get that all the time, and I right away say, pay whatever you can, and I'll cover the rest. But that's the cost. I mean, thank God our standard of mezuzah. I want it to be high because I truly feel that a mezuzah is not just a scroll on the doorpost. It actually brings incredible blessings into your life. And I see stories from people in our community that they didn't have a good mezuzah, and I went to check it, and it talks about children in the mezuzah. It talks about teaching your children, and they were struggling with their children, and their children were rebellious, and they changed their mezuzahs, and they ended up having a better relationship with their children. So for me, having a good mezuzah is not just a few words on the doorpost. It's a blessing for a vessel for many more things to come in your life. So anyway, we're more particular on getting a good mezuzah and not just one that was written by a sofer very, very quickly. So our cheapest mezuzah is like $80. Hey, I was just talking about you in our class. I was just talking about auctioning off mitzvahs. I just mentioned you. Hi, just can you want to say hi? Okay, she's a little shy. Thank you. But like this is a beautiful perspective when you learn it here, that when you budget properly and you have a place of bitachon, you realize that when you spend money on a good thing, it never bites you. It actually only comes back in a good way. And therefore, like giving tzedakah, it's a beautiful thing to have a perspective that the tzedakah that I give never hurts me. And just to quote this again from, I love this verse from King Solomon. I'm gonna have to remember it for later. One who gives freely and yet increases his money, and one who withholds from giving what is proper, only to end with a loss. Okay, so just to summarize these ideas, I think that's the end the person who spends money on mitzvot is given more, while the one who withholds his money ends up losing. I love this idea. One who spends on mitzvot is given more. I think what that means is when Hashem sees that your care is in the good things, meaning you're spending money, but you're spending it on good things, Hashem will give you more to spend on. But when a person is spending on the wrong things, Hashem's like, that's not what I had in mind. And well, you'll end up not having enough. Anyway, it's a beautiful perspective. And when a person is, to summarize this last idea, when a person is generous with his money and you're using it for mitzvot, and I think the mitzvot doesn't only mean charity. Mitzvot over here means buying a nice etrog for the holiday of Sukkot, or spending money when it comes to Rosh Hashanah to help other people, or for whatever mitzvah that it is that you're involved in. Hashem will give you more to be able to continue doing that. That takes a perspective of bitachon. You have to have that attitude of bitachon to see it. When a person is miserly and he's very frugal with his spending on a mitzvah, because you don't have the bitachon of seeing it come back, you will see a loss in your money and it won't come back. So it's a pretty heavy ending, but I think it's just more a bitachon mindset that our spending in a mitzvah is a blessing, and bitachon helps us see it that way. Okay, that will end today's class, and we'll continue, God willing, next week with the last three ideas of the contrast between a person with bitachon versus a person without bitachon. And that will be on page 212. All right, thank you, everybody. Have a great day, Robin. Bye, Lynn.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Liana. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Freda. I will see you all next Wednesday.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Nancy.